Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. There is a Kentucky encyclopedia, a Louisville encyclopedia, and if my guest has his way, we may be seeing a Jackson Purchase encyclopedia. My guest today is Dr. Bill Mulligan, professor of history at Murray State University, and we're going to talk about the 60th anniversary, boy, you know you're getting old, of the Jackson Purchase Historical Society. Bill, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Barry. It's good to be here again and see you. It's been a while since I did this show.
It has been a spell.
But it's a long-running show now.
It is. Not quite as old as the Society, but it's a long-running show.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the Society today. What's going on with the Society?
Well, I became president of the Society about a year and a half ago, and since I had spent some of my career teaching a course on how to run historical societies and organizations, I had a chance to apply those lessons. And so we've been trying to increase the number of programs, get more public involvement. And since this year is our 60th anniversary, the Society was founded in 1958 by faculty from Murray State and community people from across both the Kentucky and Tennessee parts of the Jackson Purchase. We sometimes forget our brethren in Tennessee.
That's right.
We decided that we're going to try some new things for the 60th because the tie-in might help with publicity. Also, coincidentally, the treaty was negotiated 200 years ago this year.
That is nice time.
And approved and signed finally by President Madison in 1819. So it's also the bicentennial of the actual purchase. And the confluence of those two things made me think, and the board concurred, to try some special things. So as I think I showed you earlier,
yes,
we've redesigned our journal, and we welcome people to submit work on purchase history. We have essay contests for high school students that we hope to expand to middle school next year. And we've added 2 programs, so instead of 4 a year, we have 6. But as you mentioned, the lasting program that I hope will be the real legacy is the encyclopedia. There's a lot of history here, and as you know, having researched and written it, there are not as many laborers in the vineyard
that's true,
as we would like.
That's true.
And there's lots of things that are simply not much is known about.
You know, one thing you mentioned is the Tennessee portion, which is actually larger than the Kentucky portion. But as time went on, it's just the Kentucky is the purchase, and it's West Tennessee.
Yeah.
Which I thought is fascinating.
Yeah, especially since Jackson is from Tennessee.
Exactly. And of course, I always kind of felt sorry for Isaac Shelby. It should be the Jackson Shelby Purchase, but he got Shelby County, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And of course, there's Shelby counties in Kentucky and lots of other states. Well, but do you think most people realize that the purchase goes all the way to the Mississippi state line?
I doubt it. You and I know it, but most people today, I think of it as a Kentucky thing. And part of that is the West Tennessee as one of the 3 great divisions, but there's also a West Tennessee Historical Society that has sprung up mostly in the Memphis suburbs.
Yeah.
And they have focused on the history of West Tennessee and refer to it consistently as West Tennessee.
And you know, I believe I'm right that the Tennessee state flag has 3 stars for East, Middle, and West, which is interesting. Interesting little designation there.
Yeah, the 3. I think they refer to them as the 3 grand divisions.
Of course. And of course, the Purchase is the grandest division of Kentucky.
Of course it is. Well, when people remember, it's part of Kentucky.
Yeah. Talk again. So, if somebody wants to join the Jackson Purchase Historical Society, what do they have to do?
Well, the easiest thing. Well, I guess you could go on our website, jacksonpurchasehistory.org, and there's a link for membership. Or you could write to the Society at Post Office Box 531, Murray, Kentucky 42071, and it's only $15 a year. And you receive the journal, invitations to all of our meetings, and updates on other activities in the Jackson Purchase that relate to history. We also have a Facebook page that we post information on, as well as sending emails to our members. In fact, we have almost 500 people who follow our Facebook page.
Wow.
And I wish we had 500 members.
That would be nice. So, well, I remember several years ago that Dieter Ulrich, when he was at Murray State, posted a lot of articles. Are you all still doing that?
We're doing less of that because of we don't have enough laborers in the vineyard.
Right.
But the encyclopedia, I'm hoping, will provide a forum for that, because it's going to be online, not in print. So it's open-ended.
Oh, wow. That's a good idea.
And instead of having, if we had a print book, it would have to be so many pages, and that would only allow so many articles. So, for example, we might have an article on Baptists in the Jackson Purchase.
Right.
But in an online version, we can have a fairly in-depth history of every Baptist church in the Jackson Purchase and biographies of important preachers. And we can do that for we can do that for all of the religious organizations. We can do that for all of the school districts that were consolidated. We don't have to have public schools in the Jackson Purchase. We can actually, over time, develop a very comprehensive, inclusive history. And the other reason that we didn't want to have a list, and several people said you have to have a list, you have to tell people what you want, and you have to make up a list. We want this to be a people's history, to quote Howard Zinn.
Right.
That I'm not going to tell the people of Hickman County, these are the 50 things about Hickman County history that deserve to be in this encyclopedia. Mm-hmm. You please tell us and share with us the 150 things about Hickman County.
That's great.
That you think should be in this. Yeah. And so it can come from the people. It can be a history of what people think is important, and it'd be freely accessible online. Now, the one thing it's sort of on the Wikipedia model with a twist. Jim Humphrey's my colleague, he and I right now are the editorial board, which we will expand as it grows. But we're not going to have open access to use, but not open access to post and change.
Right, yes. Good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want, a bunch of puff pieces, or we don't want old feuds being aired.
Right. There are a few of those around.
There are. Mm-hmm. And so, we're going to try to maintain a level of quality control and accuracy, as well as, but with access and open-ended, so that hopefully, when I don't know that I'll be here for the 100th anniversary of the Society in 40 years, but 40 years from now, the encyclopedia will still be an asset that the people of the Jackson Purchase and beyond can use. So it'd be easier for teachers to do units on Jackson Purchase history in middle school and high school.
Right.
And it just would make our history of this area, which is so rich, when you think about it, all of the things that happened here. I mean, you and I have both worked on the Civil War. You can make a strong case that this is the crucial area.
Well, the historian, I forget his name, but on the anniversary of the Battle of Fort Donelson, my wife and I went in and heard this guy, and his thesis is, this is where the war was won. And if you think about it, Grant knocks a hole in the Confederate lines at Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, opens the way to Nashville, and here they come. Yeah, I think that's good. That's an excellent way to put that.
Well, that also, Columbus is abandoned without a shot.
Absolutely.
The second most heavily fortified spot in North America.
Gibraltar
is suddenly not defensible.
It is, and it's and all this is out there too. And doing my research on this, when I was an undergrad at Murray, way back when, I'm not going to say when, it was a while ago. I was amazed at how few resources there are, but then the more you get to digging. For example, one of the most interesting chapters, I think, in the Civil War is when they went after Columbus. They weren't sure it was abandoned or not, and there are reporters from big city papers with this flotilla, and they go down the river, and they do a great job of describing, are we going into a hornet's nest, and they're looking through their spy glasses, and they can't tell are they there or not, and then when they're not there, then they rush ashore. Sherman's involved in this. It's a fascinating chapter, but one of the greatest. I think this is a fantastic idea because I envisioned a book. Oh. Well, okay, you've got the Kentucky Encyclopedia. Well, history's being made all the time. Do you have to have a second volume, a third volume, a fourth volume? That's expensive, and the same with Louisville Encyclopedia. Yeah. But this is a great idea. This is really good.
Well, we're hoping that it will, be around for a long time, and takes advantage of new technology. I certainly don't look forward to the demise of the book, and I think the book will always be with us. I don't know a lot of people that like to snuggle up with their Kindle.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I know. I agree with you.
But on the other hand, when you think of things being readily available to any school child in school, at home, anyone who wants to do research or investigate something. Even if, say, a tourist group wants to, what are the historic churches in our county that we can do a tour? Where were the historic schools? It allows all kinds of uses at the instigation of the person who has the need for the information. And I think we're seeing, and I think I know you're retired now, but it's so much easier to give students research assignments now because so much information is available online.
It is.
And Murray has a good library, but it's limited by resources and only dating from 1922. I mean, this is just a little aside. I was in Dublin at Trinity College, and one of the things they show you on the tour.
That's Dublin, Ireland, not Dublin, Kentucky.
Dublin,
right?
Ireland,
Exactly.
yes. They have the long room, and they have the old books from the university's collection. Well, the university was founded in 1593.
Right.
And so the collection has been around. Murray was founded in 1922. I mean, a lot of schools had a head start on us in library.
Yeah, sure.
But now you go to Google Books, you go to National Archive website, Library of Congress website, and boom, it's there. And so that's what we want to do for the Jackson Purchase.
It's absolutely amazing about the research. The books I've done on the Purchase, and I just finished one on Civil War newspapers, a lot of that is online. And when I did my master's, I did a master's thesis in history and one in journalism at Murray. And the journalism, I went to Lexington and actually looked through bound volumes of the Lexington Statesman. Well, now it's on microfilm. A lot of this stuff is online. And collections, letters, documents. Research has never been easier for someone. You don't have to go 100 miles. However, I will say this, and I bet you would agree, it's a lot of fun to actually touch it.
Oh, no, I think that's that's the thrill when you're in a library or an archive and you ask for something and they bring it, and it's got enough dust on it that no one's looked at this in a long time.
Right.
And that you're likely to find something that has been missed or forgotten, or maybe in some instances never looked at. I mean, you've probably had this experience too, where you end up, some of the pages aren't even cut yet on the book.
Right.
And
yeah,
this is sort of new territory.
Oh, it is. It is.
And that part, I think, will always be there. And I think all of us who've done research will admit that that's part of the thrill.
Oh, it is.
It's the finding something. I can remember when I was I was an assistant director of a research center earlier in my career, and one of our fellows was running through the halls with a ledger book from the DuPont company and just shouting, E.I. DuPont is violating the laws of economics.
Right.
And he's just so excited. He found something,
I know.
and he was just so excited.
I know.
And I think we've all had those moments when it's just, I thought that, oh my God, that's the missing piece.
It absolutely is. So when might this encyclopedia begin?
Well, it's beginning. We've announced it through press releases and mailings to museums and historical societies in the Purchase and to the history departments at Murray and Martin. And we're going to be rolling out information as we can. I hope we will see the first online entries sometime in the summer.
Excellent.
Because our year is a August to July year, and we always have a meeting in July. And already for that meeting, we're on track to be able to announce that the entire back run of our journal will be digitized and available globally. And that, so if we could also pair that with announcing that we've now got the first of the encyclopedia articles online. Well, that's sort of the goal. And then since it's not the end, that's sort of the beginning. And hopefully once people see that it's real, and the more we do, the more we can hope to attract, because we will also probably periodically, and you know how this works, send out an article to the local media as a special, and hopefully people will say, oh yeah, I heard about that. I've been meaning to, we really need to make sure our church is in that, or we need to make sure that the Rotary Club of Hickman is included, or someone should write about some of the special events here in Paducah, the 8th of August, or the the Quilt Festival. Someone should write on the history of the Quilt Festival.
Then the question is, how do you do that? Let's say somebody out here in Dublin, Kentucky, wants to write a history of Dublin, Kentucky for this. How do they do it? How do they contact you about this?
Well, they can contact us through the Society's mailbox that I gave earlier, or they can email me at my I use my non-university account for this just to keep things from getting lost. There's a lot of university email.
Well, same here. Yeah.
Bill Mulligan at murray-ky.net, and then we can talk with them. My first book was a history of the town of Northborough, Massachusetts from 1638 to 1975. So I have some experience in writing community history.
Right.
And so can offer them, if they need it, pointers of what kinds of things to look for and what to do.
That is a real neglected part of history. Many years ago, I was at an Ohio Valley conference at Western, and Thomas D. Clark, the great Kentucky historian, was there, and he lamented the fact that professional historians often ignore local history. And, if you put it in context, Paducah in the context of Pearl Harbor, what were Paducans doing at Pearl Harbor? This is really interesting reading. And I'm really glad to see that you're in. I remember several years ago, you all did an excellent job at Columbus updating the signage and pointing out that Columbus was very important after the Confederates left as a recruiting point for African Americans in Kentucky, second only to Camp Nelson up in Jessamine County. And didn't you all do around Sacramento, do some signage up there?
Yeah, we did a
cavalry battle.
I helped design and I wrote the initial draft for a driving tour for the Battle of Sacramento. We've done signage at Columbus on African Americans. We did a 32-stop driving tour from Henderson to Ballard County along the Ohio River for sites related to the Civil War. I think that we forget. I mean, Tip O'Neill, you remember Tip O'Neill. A lot of our viewers might not remember Tip O'Neill.
Do.
But he's Speaker of the House of Representatives, and he once famously said, all politics is local.
Right.
And I think as a historian, we can almost say all history is local.
It is.
The Civil War didn't happen in Washington and Richmond.
Right.
It happened in Paducah. It happened in Moscow, Kentucky.
It did.
There was a contingent of the 4th U.S. Colored Heavy Artillery, and their job was to guard the railroad bridge in Moscow. And that's not a small assignment because Forrest, as you know, there were people like Nathan Bedford Forrest actively looking to destroy railroad bridges.
Exactly.
And so you have these 8 or 10 guys with one cannon. And
yeah. And of course, too, of late I've done some research into guerrilla warfare. And of course, this for years was a very neglected part of Civil War history. Understandably, I mean, you're going to write about Vicksburg and Gettysburg, the big campaigns. But I don't think people are aware just how brutal and savage guerrilla warfare was here. You couldn't go from Murray to Mayfield in safety most parts of the war because the big Union units were stationed in Paducah and Columbus. But out here in the hinterland, I've come across some horrific stories.
Well, there was a lynch. It was one of the first projects I worked on when I came here in '93, and there were lynchings in the Jackson Purchase of people who were primarily Unionists because the area was very pro-Confederate.
Right.
And I guess they just wouldn't shut up about it, and finally their neighbors shut them up.
Well, one of the most gruesome stories along that line, there was a guerrilla leader in Grace County named Kesterson, and he was Jim Kesterson. He rode into town brazenly, and again, this Union troops are in Paducah, they're in Columbus, but not in Mayfield. He rides into town, rides up to the house of J.B. Happy, a local Unionist. If you've been to Mayfield, the Happy House restaurant, that's his family. They call him out on his porch with his wife and kids and gun him down in front of his wife and kids. That's how brutal this was.
Oh, no.
And you mentioned the lynchings. Milburn, Kentucky, over in Carlisle County, is this little Unionist enclave for reasons not entirely clear, but nonetheless, they would come over from Blandville and these various places and just terrorize the town. And my wife is from Carlisle County, from Arlington, and she had several friends from Milburn. None of them knew about this. And these are educated people. They'd never heard of this. And this encyclopedia can really fill in the niches. And I think it'd be really interesting. You're going through Milburn and think, wow, this place was terrible.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the Unionists, a man named Stone, his house is still there. It's for sale. but he wants to buy it. But there's so much of this history that's obscure, totally obscure.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I think people want to forget once it's over.
Oh, I'm sure that's true in Melbourne, especially.
And I think, the community has to come back together. We can see in Kentucky, of course, we know people didn't always do that. The Hatfields and the McCoys and Kentucky's history of feuds. But for most people, the war is over. We've got to work together. We've got to live together. And, you try to blend in. And I think actually along those lines, I got to know a man through my Civil War battlefield preservation work who all his life had been told his grandfather had been a Confederate soldier in East Kentucky. And he got into the Civil War, and he thought he would reenact and be his grandfather. And he did the research, and grandfather had been a Union soldier.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
But after the war in Kentucky,
absolutely,
it was not politic to admit to Union Army service. We see that the monuments in Kentucky are overwhelmingly for a Confederate cause.
Even though Kentucky was overwhelmingly Unionist, yes. Along those same lines, in fact, to bring this back to the Historical Society, one of the founders was Dr. Hunter Hancock of Murray State. He grew up in Mayfield, but Murray State. He told a story about his grandfather moving to Mayfield from Henderson after the war, and he told everyone he was in the 3rd Kentucky, and that's as far as he would go. Well, they assumed that was the 3rd Kentucky Mounted Infantry Confederate. 3rd Kentucky Cavalry Union. And he said he did that because he wanted to get a loan from the bank. He wanted to get along with his neighbors. But one of the most interesting stories that Dr. Hancock told was his grandfather lived to be quite old. And when Hunter was a little boy, he took him on a tour of the Shiloh battlefield. He landed with Buell's troops and took him. Can you imagine that? Here I was, and here I was. And you run across that. You really do. And another very funny story, and I'm not going to mention names because this woman would be horribly embarrassed. She called me up and said, I have a Civil War ancestor that I want to learn about. He was a Confederate captain. His name was Thomas Jones Gregory. I said, oh, he was a captain, but he was captain of the Union Home Guard. Well, she was crestfallen. She was crushed. She was devastated. Oh, my God, I have a Yankee ancestor. I said, you sure do. And so she wasn't particularly interested in looking any further than that. And then another fella in Grays County, I happened to mention to him his name. I said, your ancestor was a very prominent Unionist. Well, we don't claim him. I put that in my book, although I didn't mention his name. But you do run across that. People don't understand that. And even in the Purchase, there were Union soldiers from the Purchase.
Oh, yeah, no.
In the time we have left, tell us about the 8th Artillery in Paducah, pretty well known. What about the 4th Artillery in Columbus, not so well known?
Well, I got interested in the 4th when I was doing a project on African Americans at Columbus. And fortunately was able to spend 10 days at the National Archives going through.
That would be fun.
Going through, it's, we could probably do a whole show on just the joy of being in the National Archives. In fact, I had a friend came along who was also a historian and archivist, and they have a limit. Each person can only have so many things at once.
That's right.
So the two of us, we ended up with double.
Right. Yeah.
And one of us could go through and one of us could copy, because they let you copy your own stuff. But anyway, and maybe most of our viewers know, everywhere there was a Union Army facility of any size, people freed themselves from slavery.
Sure.
And gathered there. And Columbus was no exception. In fact, there were so many at Columbus that it actually is a catalyst for the need to have a real policy. Grant is constantly writing to Halleck, what am I supposed to do with these people? I mean, they don't want to send them back to slavery because many of the officers especially are abolitionists, even early in the war before it's an overt war aim, and they're not sending anyone back to slavery. On the other hand, supplies, food, etc., are not. And so, what are we to do? There's a colony of 1,000 freed people set up on Island 10. They're used to load and unload ships and supplement. Finally, under pressure from black abolitionists and white abolitionists, Lincoln consents to the enlistment of African American troops. Now, Governor Bramlett of Kentucky, as you know,
not too fond of the idea,
writes a 9-page letter. And so none of the units raised in Kentucky have the designation Kentucky.
That's right.
It's the only state that recruited significant number of African Americans that did not designate them.
Is Kentucky number 2 behind Louisiana?
In the official score sheet, it is.
But it could be number one.
I've written about that. If you know the story of Elijah Mars, he and his colleagues swam across the Ohio River and enlisted in Indiana. They are all from Kentucky.
Right.
In the early period at Columbus, they are enlisting troops, African-American troops, into the Army before it is permissible. And they are often simply, in the book, it is credited District of Memphis, which technically Columbus was part of the District of Memphis. So sort of fudging the, and so they're probably credited to Tennessee.
Right.
So if we look at the logistics of these stories, and the Mars story is not made up, it's well documented in his book and everything, and we look at the actual wait a minute, this is the record book from Columbus. The unit is at Columbus when these people are enlisting. How could they be enlisting, in Memphis? Right. So Kentucky probably led the chart. But the fourth, it would be nice, to have a glorious story. But they were mostly served on garrison duty. They guarded the railroad bridges at Moscow and all the little...
And tangled with guerrillas often.
They didn't see any big action, but they saw a lot of little action. And they carried out their mission effectively. They were sent on to go recruit other African Americans once it became acceptable. They actually fought against Forrest and some of his troops in Dover when there's just a chance encounter. They acquitted themselves well. And I think it's an important story. Now, the 8th, of course, has the Battle of Paducah as its central moment. The 4th doesn't have anything that dramatic, but, and in the article I'm working on now, I start with the premise that we often, as historians, have written that Lincoln freed the slaves, that African Americans were given their freedom. And we forget that close to 250,000 African-American men enlisted in the Union Army. And fought to claim their freedom. And untold hundreds of thousands simply went to Union Army camps and endured fairly horrendous conditions to be free. And offered themselves for service, did whatever was asked of them in terms of labor. In fact, one of the, I think, shames that I found, and it's in the American Missionary Association, who sent an agent to Columbus. These black men were often used to load and unload ships and not paid. And yet, but they were willing to do it because they wanted to be free. And I think that's an important story.
It is. And we're out of time. Enjoyed it thoroughly. Love to do this again sometime. Thank you very much.
No problem. My pleasure.
My guest today was Bill Mulligan. I'm Barry Craig. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.